Well, hi, my name is Nicholas, and welcome to my garden. We're over on the east coast of Vancouver Island in Western Canada. Zone, in my heart, it's a zone 8. I think we might technically be a zone 7B, but definitely a zone 8 in my heart. Anyway, I just wanted to show you around the garden, show you some of the things that we've been working on this year. We did a veggie bed for the first time, so that's been very much a learning experience, but also super rewarding. And then basically my love of like flowers and growing things has exploded since we have all the extra space. So we just have like flower beds everywhere, and it seems like the pollinators really like it. We have like quite a bit of wildlife in the garden, mostly welcome things like frogs and snakes and birds. Occasionally like bears and things like that. But yeah, so enjoy the tour.
Okay, so we're starting in the vegetable garden that Lewis and I built this year, and we have 5 beds. The larger two are, or actually, it doesn't matter how big they are. That's not interesting.
It is interesting.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
some perspective.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so the larger ones are 12 by 4 and 2 feet deep, and then there's a 10 by 4, 8 by 4, and 4 by 4. And we burn the wood as a way of treating it without having to use any chemicals or anything. And then we burned it, and then we used like a linseed oil to kind of finish it. But it's actually super hard, and like even when we were putting the screws in, it was kind of hard to get them in the beginning. So it seems to be working pretty well, and also we like the look. Um, and then in the first bed, we have the tomatoes, and we have 3 different kinds. And then there's actually some like little tomatoes growing on the cherry tomatoes, which was super exciting. And Kyle told us all about how to prune them so that they don't get like mildewy or whatever. So we cut off basically like the bottom leaves so that the breeze could go through, and then cut out some of the suckers. And in the beginning, it was super hard to do because I was like cutting away all this growth, but then it started to look really good, so I felt better about it. Yeah, so that's that bed, and there's also onions and basil and nasturtiums, and then we're doing like a Three Sisters thing over here. So we have the corn that's like about 2 feet tall now, and the sunflowers are about 2 feet tall, and then we have the beans that we sowed a couple weeks ago, maybe like 10 days ago. And then we have some squash to add as well. And then the beans that are growing up the trellis, my brother sent from Greece. They are a kind of giant runner bean that's like really popular there. And he sent us some for eating, and I saved 4 of them and we grew them. And they've done amazing. They've made it like all the way to the top, and you can actually see all the little like blossoms, I guess. So that should be cool. Okay, so moving on to the next bed. This is the last of the big ones, and the idea in general is to rotate these ones so that we can do, crop rotations. So this one was like a complete surprise. We started with arugula, and that bolted really, really quickly because we had a super hot May. But the beets are doing amazing. They've all started kind of bulging above the soil, so I think we might be able to start harvesting them soon. And then we've been picking away at the lower like kale leaves. There's like purple kale and then this kind of like blue kale. So yeah, those ones are doing amazing. And then these sunflowers, I'm so excited about because we started them from seed, and I've grown these ones before. They're the teddy bear sunflowers. And I grew them in a border that obviously wasn't as rich as this because this one is like looking pretty huge. And there's like a ton of buds on it as well. So I think it's going to be pretty spectacular. And then the broccoli is wild as well. I don't know when you're supposed to harvest broccoli, but I didn't think it was now. Um, so all of a sudden we just had to like start eating it, and it was like the most tender broccoli I've ever had. It was just like, it wasn't bitter at all. You could just like eat it straight off the plant, and it was like perfect. And we shared it with the dogs too, and they thought it was okay. And then moving on here, this is maybe the one that I'm the most excited about because it's the asparagus bed and we love asparagus. And we started with, I think, 16 crowns that we put in the ground, and 11 of them have come up, which I guess is pretty good. We'll see. And then we thought we'd fill it in with a few annuals. So we did some dill and some cosmos that we grew from seeds just to kind of keep the theme with the frothy, like frondy foliage. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited about this one. I'm excited for next year to see if we can maybe harvest a few spears. There's 11 crowns, and they each have like one or two, so whatever that is. So I think next year we should be able to do like a couple. And then the year after, it will be like pretty good. Yeah. And then, so this is a perennial bed. And then this one is as well. We put two different kinds of raspberry, and they're both the everbearing kind. So they actually have like new canes coming up that will have fruit in September, and their existing canes are fruiting now. So we'll just have a few. It's just the first year. And then there's one of the cannabis plants that we started from seed as well. It's cannabis indica, I want to say Northern Lights, and it's growing super strong. I don't know if it gets quite enough sun because it seems to be leaning a little bit, but I love the impact of the leaves. And then that's sitting under some of the apple trees. So these ones like are loaded with apples. These were the bears' favorites last summer, so I'm curious to see how the bear is going to do with the vegetable gardens and with the dogs and everything else. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the apples too.
All right, Nicholas, what do you know about this cherry? Did you prune it?
I have not pruned it, but what I learned was that you shouldn't prune cherry trees in winter like you would some other fruit trees. You should wait until summer. So that's what I'm doing. So the month of July is going to be our pruning month because we have like I think 10 or 11 fruit trees altogether that we need to prune. So that's what we'll be doing. But this one has grown a ton of fruit. It had a ton of blossoms. And this one less so. So I think this is the one that needs the pruning a little more, especially just to get more light into the fruit. But the robins have been loving the cherries. They get to them before they're like fully ripe. And a few times we've seen like a parent robin who knocks the cherries down, and then the little like fledgling robins will go and eat the cherries, which is super cute. And then when the dogs come, they all kind of like half fly like into a little tree or something. But yeah, it's just like absolutely loaded. And the one or two that we've had so far have been like a little sour, but we just like really wanted to try some. And we'll see. Hopefully we'll get to some before the birds. Sweet. And then we got these felt sacks. I don't know exactly what they're called. Um, but yeah, we decided to grow two different kinds of potatoes. They both take about the same time. So I think next year we might do like an early one and then like a later one to stagger it a little bit. Yeah, we started doing this thing where we filled the sacks about a third full and then put the potatoes down and just covered them. And then as soon as the shoots appeared, we soiled them up. And we did that, I think, 3 times until it was to the top. And supposedly that way they'll grow new roots along each node. And then from there, you'll get more potatoes. So it's a way to get more potatoes using like a smaller space. And then one of my favorite parts about this whole kind of vegetable garden is this rose, which is some kind of a shrub rose. I honestly have no idea, but it blooms from May to frost, and it's you don't have to like deadhead it or anything. It doesn't go to fruit, but it's always covered with pollinators, and it smells amazing. Because I feel like that's what I want to be doing. This, I like to hyperventilate into this rose when things are not what I want them to be. I take this rose and I put it over my nose. You know how you have to put your own oxygen mask on before you apply it to somebody else? Make sure you're smelling your roses before you make other people smell them. So anyway, that's the rose. I want to show you the succulent dish that we made. So when we moved in, there was this big satellite dish, and it was defunct. It was from like somebody who lived next door like 10 years ago or something. So it was like a little bit ugly where it was, but it was basically a gigantic colander. So pretty much immediately we started thinking of how we can use it in the garden. And of course, the first idea was succulents because we live in a rainforest, except for the last 2 years where it's been kind of dry. But it's a temperate rainforest, so it's not like a natural habitat for a lot of succulents. So we basically took it down and we placed it and we filled it. We wanted it to be somewhat lightweight because I was worried about it like tacoing open. So we did like mostly perlite mixed with some like wood chips, a little bit of soil, kind of this and that. And then the ones that I'm most excited about are this group of three here and then these three here because those are like the two native ones. This is Sedum oregonium, which is native to the west coast of North America. And this one is Sedum spathiphyllum, which is, I believe, native to only like higher elevations in kind of a similar range. But anyway, those ones are super special, and they're both blooming around the same time too. And then a lot of the other ones were propagated. So I started off with one of these aeoniums last summer, and it grew to maybe about like a foot tall. And then I basically cut segments of it, and each of the segments grew new heads and then eventually roots, so that I ended up, I think, with like 7 separate plants by the end of winter. So I kept pretty busy. And then a lot of these too, like when I got them, they already had some pups, especially for the hen and chicks. So I would just like take off some of the more mature chicks and place them somewhere else. And they like love being in nooks and crannies. And then another one I really like is this one, which is Echeveria. It's Pearl von Nurnberg. And that is actually the head of this body. So I decapitated, and then these are the new heads that it's growing. And then I also took some of the leaves and grew some more rosettes from them as well. So there's like a few over here. They like a little bit more shade. And originally I was only going to do things that were fully hardy in our area. And then that didn't last very long. So then I started putting in other things too. I think this is a mammillaria cactus, and they kind of crawl along the ground. So it's normal for it to be kind of parallel to the ground, I think. Um, and then that's just planted in the pot, so I can lift that up and take it inside. As far as like the top dressing, we just wanted to kind of give it an impact and help frame. We chose the colors to complement and contrast. And then this is from a deer that Cosmo found the body of, I think last year. And then it took like a long time for it to be kind of, I guess, cleaned by the like nature cleaning crew. And once it looked good, we decided to bring it up. And it seemed like a natural fit. Well, I guess I was going to say that um, sometimes with perennials, because I grow them from cutting and occasionally from seed, I can't really put them in the ground right away because they're too small and they just get lost. So I like using pots a lot, and I can combine things that need like an extra year to grow with maybe some annuals, or if there's plants that I know what they are because of the foliage, but I've never seen them bloom. I don't know where in the garden I want them as well, so I use pots for that as well. And then also it's just like nice to come home to. So this is our garage door. So I have a few salvias, which the hummingbirds are all over. It's like some of their favorite ones. And then there's a hydrangea that we was like a really small, like discounted, kind of sad looking one. And then this year it's looking way better than last year. And I think next year I'll put it out into the landscape. Um, and then when my mom was here last summer, she had noticed a lack of geraniums in the landscape. So I agreed that there was a lack of geraniums. And then this year I kind of like went to town. So there's a few geraniums around. And this dahlia down here actually is like kind of a favorite. It's cafe au lait, which is, it's kind of beige, which is kind of fun for a dahlia, but it's tinted with a purple that's like a little bit like this purple. So, and then I chose a heuchera to go with it because I felt like they'll all be kind of the same colors and it will make sense. And then this one here is the lemon scented geranium. And it just has the strongest, like kind of citronella, lemony leaves. So it's nice to have that somewhere that you walk by a lot because you can just like stoop down and smell it. One thing that I wanted to show you was this hydrangea. I don't know the exact cultivar, but it's an arborescens type, which is native to North America, not to this area, but the pollinators seem to like it. But what was exciting about it was I cut it all the way to the ground, and I had read that this one you can do that with, where it had gotten kind of overgrown and scraggly. It was like kind of walking away from the center a little bit. So I cut it, and I didn't even cut it to a node, which is what I would normally do. This was just like anywhere and to the base. It was like just a few inches. And I wasn't sure that anything would happen. And it was a little bit scary. But anyway, there's now like almost 3 feet of growth, and you can see all the nice mop heads forming. This one starts off green, and then it turns white for the summer, and then it will slowly turn kind of that papery off-white brown. So yeah, anyway, I'm just super excited about it. So now that I know that, anytime it gets overgrown, or if it's grown somewhere where, if we have like a winter where there's like a lot of snow coming off the roof, it's better for it to just be low, because otherwise it will just break anyway. Okay, so there's more pots. Some of them were actually, or I guess this one was an indoor one. And then there's also more geraniums over here. This was one of the spots that I thought that they would do really well. And I kind of had like a little bit of theme with the pot. These pots were on sale for $5.99, which for a glazed ceramic pot is wild. So there was an opportunity to really fill this space in, and I went for it. And then a lot of what you see here that's like really leafy is like dahlias, there's cannas. So those were all grown from tubers. And I started them off in the house, or some of them were started in the house, and then the rest in the greenhouse, which is unheated, but it just gave them like a good head start. And generally in the landscape, most of our dahlias have been decapitated by the dogs, but the ones that are in the pots are doing really, really well. And then like, yeah, the little Norfolk Island pine was inside for winter, and it seems really happy outside with like a little extra heat and stuff. Cosmo christened this pot as soon as I had finished arranging them. He came and peed on it, so I think he approved. And actually, this banana is kind of cool too, because I overwintered this inside. So I cut off all the leaves when I took it in, and instead of storing it, I actually just replanted it as a house plant. So it slowly started to grow again, and then just acclimated it to being outside so that it would have a head start. Because with some of the cannas, it took like a couple of months for them to get going. Yeah. Oh, and then one more thing is this piece of driftwood that was actually kind of part of a root structure, but I thought it looked a little bit like, I wasn't sure if it looked like a whale or maybe a mako shark or something like that, but there was something just like islandy feeling about it, so it felt like it had to be here. And then there's one more pot that's like just rocks, and I kind of liked it both like as like the literal anchor because it's like at one end, and then also just like it felt like a rest point because there's a lot of color going on, and it felt like you needed like a little quiet, dull space to just like chill. Yeah, these ones were actually just like I got one like 4 inch pot that had one strand, and it started indoors, and I just like planted it with a bunch of other stuff, and then I just kept cutting the tip and planting it right back in. I didn't even root it in water. It was just like straight into the soil, and I kept doing that. And then that one is full, so then I had nowhere to put them. So I started putting them in like a bowl with just like pumice, and then eventually I brought it out here, and it's just like spreading. There's also something kind of fun about like, I don't know, not that it was a South African garden, but there was like quite a few things that ended up being kind of South African or from Southern Africa. So like the Tridescantia, the pelargoniums, there's like these guys here, the gladioluses, there's the elephant ears. So anyway, it was just kind of like, yeah, I feel like they're happy together. And then there's like this guy from the South Pacific, but yeah. This area we call Moosey's Garden. It's dedicated to Artemis, who died a few years ago. And she absolutely loved the sun. She was like a sunbather. And she always knew when the sun was in her spot, and she'd ask to be let out so that she could go lie there. So this is kind of dedicated to her. South is that direction, so it gets a lot of sunlight, and we kind of like imagine her there, like in a spot where she can just like bask all day. And because it's kind of a sunshine garden, we chose hot colors. So a lot of the blooms, which aren't out right now, but will be out, are like kind of yellows, reds, oranges, things like that. And then we also want there to be a lot of foliage. So we're kind of building it as the budget allows with like a lot of annuals in between until we can get some of the other plants that we want. But one of the ones that's like really special is this banana that actually my in-laws got for me for my birthday last year. And I thought for sure that it had died because we had a really hard frost. It is a hardy banana, but it was in a pot, so I just wasn't sure if it would make it. But I cut it back this spring, and then I noticed that it did put up some new shoots. So it's been doing pretty well. That one gets the most attention. It gets regular like chicken feed, and I also give it like homemade compost, and it also gets like seaweed feed and like everything because I'm determined that this banana grows. And it's not a fruiting kind. It's the kind that they grow for fiber. So if you ever have banana fiber clothes, it's this kind of banana. Yeah, and then these guys we planted together like maybe 6 weeks ago. I don't know. Time is an illusion. But yeah, those are uh, normally called bee balm, and they have like bright red flowers. I think actually a couple of the ones that get more sun further up are in bloom already. And then a lot of the evergreens that we chose, there was a big sale at one of the nurseries when they reopened for the year in March. So we went and got a bunch of like yellow conifers so that even in winter you kind of still get that theme of the hot border. And then here there's these three rudbeckias. They're black-eyed Susans. The variety is Indian Summer, and they have like giant flowers. And these ones we grew from seed last year. They overwintered in one of the beds by the house, and then we brought them out here, and they seem to be thriving. So many things. I see actually a gap where there was a discounted maple tree that looked beautiful for about 5 minutes, and then I think we realized why it was discounted. I think there was something wrong with it, and although we tried to save it, it just like wasn't happening. So we have some plans to maybe replace it with something else. But for now, it's just like all about the annuals that are there. Yeah. And then there's like a few things that we put in that are like, we're going to wait like several years, I think, before we actually see anything from them. So this is a tree peony. So these ones, unlike the other ones that are herbaceous, these ones actually have like structure in winter that's like deciduous. So it'll be kind of like a collection of sticks, but they naturally have kind of a fountain shape. So that should look pretty cool. And then the flowers will be bright yellow eventually. And then we have these lilies that I've kind of planted all around anywhere near pathways because apparently they smell amazing. So we haven't smelled them yet, but they were called like Golden Splendor or something like that. Um, yeah, and then there's a mix. So we have like, this was a chrysanthemum that we just got. It was like a $3 grocery store one, and it somehow survived the winter. So I thought it deserved a place in this garden. And then, yeah, there's just like a mix. So there's like, these guys here are perennial. They'll come back every year. And then like the irises have already bloomed. And then we've kind of just dotted a few things here and there. And then behind me here, we have more elephant ears. So these ones were like a Costco find. And they really had to be car. They really had to be babied because I like had them in a Tupperware with pumice, and they had to be warm but not too sunny but still bright, but like all this stuff. So they were in there for like a month, and then nothing had really happened, but I think that they were slowly waking up. Anyway, so then I potted them on, and then they've been in the greenhouse for an additional 2 months, and then finally they started doing stuff, so it felt like they were ready to come out. And these ones technically are perennial here, as long as our winter isn't too wet. So we'll see. And I was saying I wanted to add more foliage to this area, so I actually planted some pumpkins. And I've noticed like at least 4 have come up over here. I did pumpkins and nasturtiums, but the pumpkins are I'll need to look up the variety, but they're orange, so I thought that they would just like look really cute to have all the beautiful leaves and then have like dotted like orange pumpkins all along. And I've heard that they can really take over an area, so I kind of want that to happen here. Well, I showed you teddy bear sunflower earlier and how huge it was in the garden bed. So these ones are what they look like normally when they're not like basically on like steroids or growth hormones. But they still will grow to about 2 feet tall. And I think these ones will start blooming a little bit later, but some of them you can see there's like a bud forming in the center. But for a lot of this place, like these little trees will get like a little bigger and stuff, so it'll kind of fill in. But for this year, we wanted to just use like a lot of annuals, and we knew the pollinators would love it too. We also have to plant a lot of things because of the dogs, and also because of the bunnies, but mostly because of the dogs. So anytime I am sowing seeds, I generally do like a tray of one thing, and then most of them will grow, and then once they come out, maybe half of them will survive, and we still end up with like kind of an impactful. I was kind of experimenting with some grasses too. I wanted to play with like, upright texture and stuff like that. And supposedly these ones will look pretty cool through winter. So like until we get snow, basically.
They look cool coming to the gate too.
Yeah, it's like a nice like wispy, and there's like a few other things like this one eventually can get to, I think like 6 feet tall and 8 feet wide. So that can be like a nice big blob over here. And then yeah, like we put a rhododendron into just because we wanted to get a little of that color. It's like a bright red one. And then here there's more of the bee balm, and there's also some zinnias kind of interplanted. And these ones you can see they're starting to get their little pompons, and they look super cute. The monkey puzzle tree. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. It's not technically a pine. It's in Oh, I'll wait for the car. It's in its own family. It's actually related to the Norfolk Island pine that I showed you earlier, and it's from South America. Just like amazingly like structural and beautiful. And I was actually thinking about that with some of the plants too. So like for the bee balm, because they also have like spiky looking flowers, I thought they would look really cute. The bee balm naturalizes really well too. It's technically in the mint family, so it kind of does like to run, although it's not like invasive. And so eventually it can take over that whole little area underneath. And then here, there was like a little bit of a moisture issue, just that it was collecting a lot. So I wanted to stagger it a little bit, both to protect the tree and also to have a little bit of a shelf that I can backfill. So I just like carried the rocks up from somewhere else. It took a while. And then I just like backfilled it with some soil that we had. A couple physio appointments later, maybe a back spasm, but it was totally worth it. And yeah, but I'm liking how it looks a lot, and it's like it's nice just to have, I don't know, something about having a garden associated with a person or somebody. It just makes it like that much more special. Cool. So we got this little archway. I think last year there's a theme, and where Lewis and I are suckers for things that are on sale when it's garden related. I'll say especially Lewis, but I fully take advantage of the situation. So, anyways, so this was on sale at the end of last year, and that's the best time to buy stuff is like September, October, when all the garden centers are getting rid of their stuff. Anyway, so we got this little arch, and then we have these two star jasmines, which aren't really a true jasmine, but they're very drought tolerant, and they should be hardy enough for our area, unless we have an exceptionally windy, super cold winter. But they already have their little blooms, even though it's just their first year, and they look super cute. And eventually they should take over, and I like that they're evergreen. They have those glossy leaves, so they'll be there all year. It's camper season on the island. And then this area here. So I will preface to say that Lewis is British, and I feel like lawns are kind of in his DNA. So it took a little while to convince him to relinquish some of the lawn. and let it be garden bed. But he is fully on board, which I'm super excited about, and he's like just as into it as I am. And also, the other thing that changed was that this year he's doing the mowing. Last year I was doing the mowing, so I think that may have like had an impact. Yeah. But basically, so what we've been doing is the garden beds were really narrow, and obviously we want more planting space. So instead of digging up all the grass, I just dig up the edge. And then I've been taking like those squares of sod and just flipping them over. And then that will kill the grass, but it will allow it to break down and feed the soil. And then I just cover it with either cardboard or when I'm out of cardboard, paper. And then I mulch it on top. And that basically will kill like 95% of what's underneath and just like allow it to compost. The cardboard and stuff, like obviously it's like basically carbon. So it's something that all plants use to grow. So they really like it. Yeah, so that's basically what we did for the whole thing here is like we re-edged it. Eventually, we think we might do like kind of a roundabout garden in the middle too. But it's been really fun kind of planting things along, and we're just taking it in stages. When we start stuff from seed, like basically when it's ready to go out, it just goes out. And some things we got from plugs as well, so we kind of grew them on for the spring and then have started putting them out now as well. I also like planting out when I have a pot with like spring bulbs, tulips and alliums and daffodils. When it's finished blooming, then I just take the whole pot, I empty the contents into a hole in one of the beds, and then next year those will come back up. So it's like a way to kind of add. So this side we call the shade garden. It is not shady. However, we want it to be the shady garden. So eventually it will be shady. For now, it's like it gets sun in the morning. So that's really nice and it allows us to grow some annuals and stuff that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. And we have kind of a general theme. There are some pink flowers that were already here, but generally everything that we've planted is white. And then we have like a lot of different kinds of greens. So from like more chartreuse kind of yellow to like the more kind of bluey greens. And that's kind of the vibe. It's meant to be a little bit chill and just like kind of a calm place to walk through. And then because we were getting the fence done too, I didn't actually put in our spring bulbs until the end of January. But they all came up, which was amazing. But they bloomed super late, so we actually have alliums still going, and we had daffodils blooming in like late May. But it was awesome. So if you ever have bulbs and you think it's too late to put them in, you can still put them in, and they will come up. And then yeah, there's some of the things that we grew from seed here. This is actually like one of my favorites. It's tobacco, and the flowers are white, and they smell kind of like jasmine, but also kind of musty or musky. And then I showed you that hydrangea earlier that I cut all the way to the ground. Before I did that, I actually took some cuttings from it, and two of the three, like that one, didn't make it, but these two have made it. So I'm really excited about that because I love that hydrangea, and the more the merrier. I don't think these will bloom this year, and even if they do, I may just cut the blooms off just so that they can focus on growing roots and stuff. But yeah, hopefully next year. These are some of our native strawberries. They're like coastal strawberry. And I believe that this one is actually one of the parent to a lot of the European varieties. So that's kind of cool. And then up here, there's this dogwood. I don't actually know the variety. And it had beautiful white flowers about a month ago. And then since then, there's this rose, which again, I don't know the name of. I'm pretty sure it's a rambler because it bloomed on old wood. But it's just been going all the way through, and the petals, there's like, they're so huge. And just like so full. I didn't think climbers would ever be that full. I always associated them with kind of the more single flowers. And the hummingbird's here. It's it's actually one of the first years that I've really noticed the hummingbirds on the roses. And I figured it does make sense because we have quite a few native roses and they're also pink and they're also scented. So like, but still it was like kind of amazing to see them like going to town. Yeah. And then, yeah, a little bit more here. I was kind of thinking like the dogs generally like to charge through somewhere. So I tried to like leave them space to do that where they wouldn't be like decapitating the lupins or anything else. And yeah, this side is actually like one of the sunniest borders that we have. So we have like a little bit of a lavender hedge going. I chose British or English lavender because it can handle our winter wet a little better and it's pretty hardy. So hopefully that will do well. I also mounded them up a little bit so that they would never be sitting in water. And then this bed, the color theme for flowers is kind of like smoky pinks, light purples, crimson reds, and then for foliage there's like blues and then also some like plums and things like that. Um, so yeah, pretty. There's a lot of fall color in here too, so things that look good with that. We have a artichoke, which I love to eat. I grew up eating artichoke, and it has like a ton of aphids. But I know that we have a lot of ladybugs in the garden, and from what I've read, it's like a little bit gross. But if you crush the aphids, it makes a smell that attracts all the aphid predators because they're like, "Oh, somebody's eating aphids. I'm gonna go eat aphids too." So we'll see. And then there's a spot for a tree. I am manifesting some kind of like a weeping spruce. So hopefully that will happen. Well, we'll see. But yeah, anyway, there was like just a hole ready for it. Cool. So as part of our border reclamation project, I wanted to make a little area here that has a bunch of hostas, which I really like, but we kind of have like a little bit of a bunny problem. So I put up a fence for it just for this year, and then next year they'll be kind of grown enough that hopefully they can handle a little nibbling. And when I was doing that, I also really wanted to make a series of grass stepping stones because I love to walk around barefoot and I don't really like to walk on mulch. That was basically the whole reason. Also, I thought it would look super cute. So I took one of our pots that was empty and put it upside down and then used a root cutting knife to cut all the way around the pot. And then I used my edger around that and then basically took out like a donut shape from around each one and then backfilled it just with the wood chips. And then we haven't mowed it yet because it's been pretty dry, but eventually we'll be able to just like mow right over it. It's like narrower than our lawnmower. And then a lot of these hostas too, like I love these ones. I think they were called Fire and Ice, and they get to about a foot across. So I think next year they'll probably be double in size. And then these ones over here, these ones are called guacamole, and they have kind of different tones of that color green. And those ones actually get 6 feet across. So within a couple years, this should be completely full. And hostas are really good companions for spring bulbs because as the bulbs' blooms start to fade, their foliage is still sticking around, so you don't want to cut them. But the hostas will come up and they'll kind of cover up whatever is not looking great and just like take over from there. And then they'll go all the way through like the end of October, maybe November for here. And then over here, it's kind of gone over now, but this was like one of my favorite spots just because it was like a little hidey hole and it's not a thoroughfare for the dogs, so they were pretty safe. But I put a bunch of the white bleeding hearts and our native trilliums as well. So about a month ago, there was all these like cute little white flowers.